Welcome back. Episode 120 of Interjections. Wow, I honestly can't believe I've been doing 120 of these. That's pretty crazy. But Inter, we have the chance to go up 7 points on Napoli, 5 points on Milan on the table. You know the drill. We never make things that easy. 2-2 draw to Napoli. We blow two leads, and we're right back where we always are, the big game narratives. I'm your host, Andrew. I've got Irfan and Sterling with me tonight, your American contingent. Irfan, what's happening?
Not too much, not too much. USA, all the way. Glad to be here with you guys. And yeah, I mean, you summed it up pretty well. We'll get into it, but you know, it's nice to at least have one team in my life that happens to win big games. I'm talking, of course, about the Chicago Bears and their amazing win over the Green Bay Packers. So
Word you never thought you would utter.
I know. So I'm excited about that part of it. And then Inter, they're nothing if they aren't consistent and reliable to do what they've been doing recently. So, yeah, but yeah, we'll get into it.
Ugh. Sterling, how are you feeling?
Yeah, unfortunately, both of my sports teams continue to let me down. At least I didn't have to watch the Bucks lose again this week, but and I didn't have to watch Inter lose either. To be fair, this is a draw, and we can talk about what it means, kind of in the grand scheme of things. But certainly a disappointing draw after leading twice today.
Yeah, we can take this one a number of ways. I guess I'll start with the overall match. This might be a hot take. I didn't think we played well. You can show me the XG that say we created more than Napoli, but that didn't pass the eye test for me. I thought we struggled a lot in this match, especially with the intensity of Napoli. And there was never really that point during the match where I felt like we sunk our teeth into it and it was ours for the taking. W- We started well, but like there were never really other points that I can look back to and say, man, like we had them by the scruff of the neck. And both times we scored, we basically immediately let Napoli back into the match. And well, when I think about like the flow of the game, the most damning portion of the match was really right after halftime when Napoli came out spitting fire. They had 70% possession in the first 15, 20 minutes of the second half. And that was the dominant portion of the match. That was where I was like, okay, we're in trouble here. And when I talk about the lack of comfort I had watching this match, why I never felt good, ignoring the emotional baggage of the previous big match's loss, a lot of it was the back line. And Akanji, it was an awful performance from him, his worst as an Inter player. I'm not going the overreaction route and saying anything ridiculous like we need to, cancel our redemption of his loan or anything silly like that. But it was jarring to see him struggle so much at central center back. And Hoyland's, uh, it was impressive how well Hoyland played. He was using his pace to go around Akanji. He was bullying Akanji physically. And honestly, I'm not sure what's more impressive, what the work Conte does with strikers to develop them, or how literally every player leaves Manchester United and suddenly looks great. But anyway, just Akanji didn't play well. Bisek had numerous just nervous moments during the game. And it was another poor match from Summer where I'm not even talking about the goals Summer conceded. I was fine-ish with the second goal was completely not on him. The first goal, I think you can have the conversation. But even outside of the goals, it was just a lack of decisiveness from Summer in the box that contributed to this overall feeling I had during this match of nervousness, of never feeling like we were in control. And the one example for Summer I want to call out is like late in the game, there was an overhit pass that Bastoni had 100% planned on just letting run through to Summer and for Summer to pick up. And when it got to the box, instead of picking it up, Summer just inexplicably started backpedaling away from the ball. And it put us in a dangerous spot. Napoli immediately had an attack from it. And it was just that kind of match for me. I never felt calm. And I guess my final point on the defense has to be Bastoni, who played a huge role in us conceding the first goal. He had a poor match. He did a poor job on that goal marking from the midfield. And that's how you can see two goals to McTominay. And even though Napoli is missing all these great attacking players, you still can see two goals to them because it was just a collectively poor team defensive performance. There's a lot more I want to touch on. I guess I'll finish with Lautaro just because he's the player getting all the heat online, and as Inter fans, he's the one we're spending all our time talking about. The stat is in his last 9 games against Napoli, he has 0 goals and 1 assist, and all the big game shortcomings he has had against Napoli and Milan and Juve. But this match was different from the last match against Napoli for me, just in that in the reverse leg, you all remember he flubbed those big chances. He had point blank chances in front of net that he failed to score on, whereas today he was just never in dangerous positions. And how much of that is actually his fault? Because when the team was struggling so much collectively, it's always the same thing with Lautaro. He feels pressure. He starts dropping deeper. He gets lost in the pure garbage that really was our midfield for a large portion of today's match. So I'm not going to light Lautaro on fire for this performance, but this is just sort of who he is. And I guess the kind of funny point to make with all the Americans here on the podcast, but I was watching the Fiorentina Milan match this morning and just looking at Pulisic's performance against Fiorentina, and he flubbed 2 huge chances. He created chances out of nothing. He dribbled through Fiorentina's entire defense, and all he had to do was finish, and he failed to do so. And that's kind of the opposite, right? Lautaro is never going to be that guy, but it's why when the team struggles, there's really no way for Lautaro to leave his impression on the match unless the ball falls to him. So when I start talking about Lautaro's big game struggles, I think it's just a microcosm of the team's big game struggles where we don't do enough. So I'll end it there. Sterling, what do you think? 1 point earned or 2 points lost?
It's definitely 2 points lost. When you lead that late in a match, you got to see it through. Um, it was a weird match. I do agree with you there, Andrew. It was one of those where I wanted us to be dominant. Leading up to the match, I would have loved it if we could have played them off the pitch, and kept our high line and really just suffocated them and made life difficult. Had them chasing shadows the whole match, but it just didn't play out that way. Napoli actually started the match fairly strong. They really put their foot on the ball, despite the fact that they only have a two-man midfield. It certainly didn't feel like that today at all. Props to McTominay, not just for the goals, but also the amount of ground that he covers, really impressive. Same with Lobotka. They both had, really strong matches, in my opinion, today. And physically, we really struggle with this Napoli side when they start flowing, and when they're confident. We really have a hard time with just their physicality throughout the entire team. So, I mean, we got into the game obviously relatively quickly after that bright start from them with the DeMarco goal, which was essentially against the run of play at that time. And at that point, you're hoping that we just kind of go from strength to strength. But the issue that I saw initially with the team today was there was this exuberance that we had where we just wanted to press so badly and win the ball back so quickly, that I think it led us to being a bit silly at times, with the way that we were pressing, and it was just a little bit too gung ho. Gung ho. It wasn't really measured in any way, and I think that that transition where Bastoni is essentially in the position of a right Mazzala, that's just, to me, disorganization. And it comes from, Bastoni trying to, he basically ran across the entire field to try and, track a marker to try and shut down a situation where, I'm not necessarily sure that he needed to do it, or I'm not necessarily sure that tactically, we were set up in the right way there, to really stop a potential transition from happening. It's just one of those weird plays that quite frankly, we just didn't see under Inzaghi. There wouldn't be a situation where we would have our left center back essentially in the position of where a right center back or a right Mazzala would be, and pairing up, tracking a midfield runner. It's just again, I think that there's a lot of good with what Kiwu is bringing to this team in terms of we do look a lot physically sharper. We do press higher. We do try and win the ball back. But today, especially in that first half, I feel like we really kind of shot our load really early. And we we just put a little bit too much into that. I would have preferred a little bit more of a measured approach and save some of that gas for the second half because obviously after the halftime period, it was all Napoli, as you mentioned, for the first 15 minutes or so, and then we found a way back into the match. Mkhitaryan comes in. That was a sub that needed to happen because we were just losing the midfield battle completely at that point. Obviously, that leads to the situation where the penalty comes about. And let's be honest, I mean, even with that penalty, it's not like Mkhitaryan was in a goal scoring position and he got taken down. He's playing a square ball. He gets his foot stepped on. It's a penalty that we've seen given. And like, listen, I'm not going to sit here and act like we don't deserve some good fortune for some of the penalties that have been given against us. Certainly, the one in the first match against Napoli this season, which was absolutely non-existent. But it's not like we really were putting them to the sword, and they had to make a last ditch effort to stop a goal from happening. And that's really that's what we created essentially in that second half until very late when Mkhitaryan hits the post, and that was all the way in stoppage time at that point. And then just yet again, I mean, the second goal that we concede, it's just very soft. It's like it's a looped ball in that no pressure on the player putting the cross in. Um, I think Bisek was the one who missed the header. And we got to listen. Bisek is Bisek at this point. We kind of know what we're going to get from him. He'll play great for 85 minutes, but there's always going to be something calamitous in the last 10 minutes of a match from him. And I wouldn't even say necessarily he was calamitous today, but he's just always somehow at the scene of the crime, right? And that's no different today. But either way, I mean, but Barella could do better to make sure the ball actually goes out of bounds. Shades of the Champions League final with that situation there. Luis Enrique's marking no one. It's just again, it just felt like we were waiting for something bad to happen, and I think it just goes back to again the mentality of the team and our inability to just kind of see out matches. With that being said, though, I do think Kivu probably has to shoulder a little bit of blame in that. I think that he could have made some subs a little bit earlier. He didn't make his last subs until he was forced to when Hakan went down with the injury, which we should mention as well. That's what does that mean? How long could he be out? Is it serious? Is it not serious? Time will tell. But I think that a Cherby coming in and maybe B set going out, Akanji sliding over, may have not been the worst way to try and see that match out. Certainly Augusto coming in for DeMarco. I think we could have made some defensive moves there, and maybe it's easier to say now, but maybe Kivu still felt like he wanted to be able to press the line higher and not drop deep so early. It's hindsight 2020 in that, but I do feel like we probably could have made a defensive sub a little bit earlier. So all in all, I mean, I think that this is one of those where hopefully we look back at it in a couple of months and we say, "Hey, it was a draw in the middle of a very good run for us." Because I do believe if we can win, the next 4 or 5 matches, we may look up and have that 7 point lead that we missed out on today. Because when you look at the depth of this Napoli side, when you look at this Milan side that's just sputtering along and probably should have lost the last 2 matches, the Champions League is coming back as well for Napoli. They're going to struggle, and we have a deeper squad still. So hopefully we look back at this one here in the near future and think that this was a point that helped us keep momentum and at least not shed any blood, if you will, to Napoli in the title race.
Yeah, I agree with that, Sterling, in terms of just our overall form this year has felt and has been better than Napoli and Milan, and you see that when you look at the table. This Milan side is like a cockroach; they just won't die. Every time they're on the ropes, they just somehow escape with a point. Whereas, what was this? Our first draw of the Kivu era here today. So there is a lot of positive signs we can point to where we can say this team's still going to win the Scudetto. But man, 2 more points today, I would have been over the moon telling you this thing was locked and loaded. And instead, we're sitting here having kind of a repeat conversation about all the same problems that have plagued this team. I, I do want to talk about Kivu's subs because you make an excellent point, and this was something I was first guessing as the match unfolded. He waited way too long to take Turam out of this game, and it he was effective in the first half, but there's clearly something wrong physically with him. And when Bonnie comes in and is immediately plays so well, it's like that would have been nicer to have earlier in the match. So I thought that was a mistake. And then I'm not sure what else he could have really done off the bench. There were people saying he should have taken Lautaro off for PO or something to that effect earlier in the match. Uh, I'm just realistic about this. I know what Lautaro's role in this team is. I know how valuable the team views him from a pressing standpoint, from a leadership standpoint. So I knew it was never going to happen. So I'm not going to be the one complaining about that from a substitution standpoint. But a Cherby coming on, I mean, considering how poorly Akanji looked, putting a Cherby or DeVry on would not have been the worst decision. And frankly, doing something instead of Luis Enrique on the right, I would have been open to because that just wasn't working today either. Irfan, give me your Lautaro breakdown. Everyone's complaining about him online. You have people defending him, saying that he just wasn't getting enough help from the team and he was having to pick up too much slack. You have others just roasting him for the lack of goals against Napoli, the lack of goals in these big spots. What's the consensus from you?
Yeah, I think you made a good point earlier on about like it wasn't the typical kind of wasteful Lautaro that we have grown accustomed to in a lot of matches. This was a little bit different. I think the record does speak for itself. He does disappear against a lot of the good teams, and he's not one of those players that's going to go out and get you like a very clutch goal against a really good opponent. Like that's just not who he is. But that doesn't mean he doesn't have like value, right? I mean, there's a reason teams like Milan struggle against 18th place teams and mid table and below teams because their players can't seem to figure out a way to score goals. Well, with Lautaro, we don't usually have that issue, right? We're able to take care of the teams that we should beat. So you got to give him credit for that. And like you said, the leadership and the all around game that he has is always top notch. Like he always delivers there. Like that's not an issue. The effort's there, the heart's there. I think today was more about the midfield once again getting kind of owned. Like I've harped on this quite a bit. Like whenever we're the second best midfield, it makes things really difficult for the team. Like we don't have the sort of individual playmakers and the speed and the trickery of the team that can kind of overcome like the solidity of our midfield missing. And that's kind of where I was at today. I thought Zelensky was okay. I thought Hakan was okay. I thought Barella was, kind of average. But again, I think McTominay and Lobotka did a very, very good job for Napoli, and I think they were kind of the backbone of that team. And it's one of those things where I think Inter fans, I think all of us need to understand one thing, and that is, you can't rest on kind of the laurels of like the name recognition, right? When it comes to Bastoni, when it comes to Barella, when it comes to Lautaro, even someone like Thuram, like I, I would challenge someone to find that any of those guys are having a better season than they've had in previous years. The name recognition is there, the name expectation is there, but frankly, our best players, quote unquote, best players, are just not performing at a super high level. Certainly not high enough where against like the the fellow sort of top four, top five teams that we're going to go out and comfortably win games. So a lot of these games are going to end up being toss ups. They're going to come down to sort of individual chances, individual mistakes, and things like that. Like we're so used to functioning as like a team that is by far more talented than the team we're playing. And so we always looked at things like mentality and stuff like that, which again, I'm not conceding that that's not an issue, but we keep thinking that like we're so universally talented that like someone like Napoli, it should be an easy win or it should be a comfortable win. Like That's just not going to happen. Like the team is no longer at a talent level vastly superior than some of the teams we play in the Champions League, and then probably the top four teams that we play in Serie A. I'm not saying we're not a better club or deeper. I think ultimately we are, but that gap has shrunk, and it's shrunk partly because our best performers are no longer performing at like a near elite level. They're still above average. They're still in some cases very very good, but just not the same anymore. They're just not performing at that level. And when it comes to reinforcements, when it comes to a change of pace, when it comes to other players, we have not added anyone much that can change that sort of script. And so that to me is like the reality of the situation. Today, I thought Enrique was really bad. Like if you go and you look at the goals that Napoli scored, he's kind of out to lunch on both goals. And I'm not saying he was primarily responsible for marking McTominay, but he's just not in like a position where he can do anything or covering something that he should be covering. And Barella, I thought, was at fault for the second goal because you can't play that way. You can't like casually run up to the ball and expect it that it's gonna and like do like some sort of lazy jump thinking that it's gonna go out of play. Like you have to like attack that ball, and if that means you have to like push it out of bounds and give him a corner, then you give him a corner. But you can't like let your defense down by having like a ball coming in from the blind side and expect them to like look at where the ball is and mark the defender who's like rushing the box. Like you just can't do that. So I kind of blame him for that. But ultimately, man, I think it all comes down to the fact that this was an opportunity lost, right? Like I think we could have really asserted ourselves in the title race and put in the seeds that would eventually lead us to kind of pull away. But this is going to be a fight all the way down to the end, right? It was a missed opportunity to kind of lengthen the gap. But I'm also not going to hyperventilate and get all worried that like someone like Napoli or someone like Milan is like all of a sudden like some front runner or something like that. I mean, Milan drew against an 18th place Fiorentina, which has like literally having the worst luck in the history of a season ever, right? And they barely drew them. And they consistently get lucky in all of these matches to scrape by 1 point. And that's playing once a week. So like spare me all of this like Milan love. And then Juventus has its massive flaws. And Napoli, we saw today, honestly, they're not that good. Like they have a couple of players who can step up. I know they had a couple of injuries as well, but really it's the same kind of Napoli team that we kind of see with Conte. And now, like you guys mentioned, they have to play twice a week. So I think it's wide open. I think the biggest loss today was the fact that we could have kind of put some distance in between us, but we didn't. That just means that we have to stay extra vigilant and continue this down the road because we just have to keep up on the points and keep winning. There's not a lot of super tough games left. I mean, we play Milan once more, and I think we play Juventus right one more time, and then that's honestly those are the only matches that should give us some sort of stress. Otherwise, we should just take care of business and be okay.
I want to take a second to talk about McTominay, and I'll tie it back to Inter in a second. I mean, everyone knows McTominay was the man of the match today because he scored 2 goals. But even beside that, Sterling mentioned he led the match in distance covered. He was all over the place. He was a force physically in the midfield. Like the guy dominated us. And it begs the question of like, when was the last time an Inter player stepped up like this in a big game? Like, we haven't had somebody, any one of our like stars, Lautaro, Barella, DeMarco, whoever, step up in that capacity and just like be the man, be the dominant player on the pitch in one of these spots in forever. And maybe that's just who this group of players is, but that's really why in the summer I was begging for us to sign someone like Lookman because while we've spent the past 2 years just like refining the team, fixing it up around the edges, smoothing it out, but we haven't signed like a marquee player. We haven't signed someone who can grow into being a star, and that's really what we need. That's what we haven't had, and every time we play Napoli, it feels like it's McTominay. Every time we play Juve, it feels like it's Yildiz. Every time we play Milan, it feels like it's Pulisic. Sometimes Leao. Just they have the guys who seize these moments, and we haven't had one. But even if you get away from the narrative stuff for a second, you don't worry so much about like the big game stuff. Just like tactically, this was a really confusing match for me because I thought we'd be the ones hunting Napoli. I thought we'd be the ones, showing the initiative because we're at home. Like we have a chance for the death knell to Napoli, and instead, I was amazed by how much less intense we were, how much we conceded possession, how much we struggled to create. I couldn't believe how much we got wrong. And I think it goes back to Sterling's point about it, what was the purpose behind a lot of our movements? Like we were pressing high up the pitch, but we weren't actually forcing much from Napoli. Like our pressing didn't put them under duress multiple times. Milinkovic Savic received the ball from a press or received the ball after a corner and immediately hoofed it deep to Hoyland or whoever else, and it turned into a dangerous Napoli chance. Like we weren't putting them under pressure, and I just don't understand how that happened when, uh, at San Paulo or Maradona, whatever you call it these days. Like I can forgive that, but here today, I just can't believe how poorly we played at home.
Yeah, and to go back to talking about some of these individual performances today, and the fact that we really don't seem to have that talisman that steps up in the big matches. I can't agree more with that. I think when you look at our performance in these big games over the last 18 months or so, I mean, you need look no further than the guys who are supposed to be the stars on this team. And they have repeatedly just not had good performances in big moments. It's Lautaro, but it's not just him. It's also Barella. It's also Bastoni. Um, DeMarco's actually probably the one that's been the most consistent recently, and he obviously scored a great goal today as well. But when you look at those three in particular, Barella, Bastoni, and Lautaro, those are the three, one in each line of the team essentially that we expect to really be our leaders and really be the ones who are decisive in these big matches. And quite frankly, they just haven't been. I did not like Lautaro's performance today at all. I quite frankly thought it was unacceptable. We just need more. It's one thing for him to miss chances, but I mean, he just was completely ineffective today. And pressing is fine. It's great. I get that he's probably one of the best pressing center forwards in football. But I mean, he did nothing today. When the ball came to his feet, he couldn't control it. He couldn't link up the play. He obviously, he had a chance to get in behind at one point too. And even one time he was off sides and he couldn't get the shot away in time. I mean, it just was woefully ineffective. And that's just not good enough. You know, it's been a long time. It's been a while. If you look at his big game record, it's not a pretty sight. And so, yeah, if that's your captain, and your other bandera and your team are also not showing up, then it's gonna be difficult to win these really top matches. The other performance I'll talk about today as well. I do think we have to talk about Akanji a little bit. Um, has been flawless so far this season for the most part. I mean, no one's flawless, but he's been really, really good for us. And today, I saw some things that really concerned me. Again, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater after one bad performance, and he's certainly a great addition to this team. However, there's some things to really keep an eye on with him going forward. If he's going to be the center back on this team, he's got to be able to deal with a long ball to a physical center forward. I mean, you can't be under pressure every time a long ball is played to a physical center forward, and your center back is just getting muscled. He's not winning the ball in the air. He's letting it bounce. He's getting turned. It worries me for what may happen maybe in some Champions League matches when we start to see some other really good physical center forwards that have pace as well. Because Hoyland, I think, is actually a very underrated player. There's a reason why he went to Manchester United for big money in the first place, and as you mentioned, Andrew, no one succeeds there, and he looks a much better player now than he did obviously there. So I do think he's a great player, but at the same time, he's not world class, and we're going to see Akanji come up against some much more stout competition especially in the business end of the Champions League. And so that was a little bit concerning for me, especially if we're looking at him as the answer long term for that position. Because obviously, I think the Acherbis of this world are going to be done. And at this point, we can't really rely on somebody that's that age for a lot of minutes in the season. So that was a little bit concerning for me today, just because I'd never really seen him struggle so much in any given match. So just two performances I want to touch on today.
Yeah, I'll just add one quick thing. It on Lautaro, the one, it's just there was a moment in this match where he was basically one on one with Juan Jesus, and he could not he couldn't do anything against him. He basically ended up losing the ball. And to me, no one, I think, even like the most hardcore Inter fan, was not expecting him to do anything in that situation. It reminded me of a couple of years ago. We were facing Liverpool, and he found himself 1v1 with Van Dijk, and like there, it's like okay, understandable. It's the Champions League. You're 1v1, and like Van Dijk is at that point still like in very good form, probably the best center back in the world. And so he doesn't even try to take him on. He just like sort of like stops, even though it was literally 1v1. He just sort of stops and doesn't even try to challenge him. Well, in this match, he goes up against like what 37-year-old Juan Jesus, and he just could not do anything against him. He just got totally tooled by Juan Jesus, and that just kind of like that kind of just summed up who he is as a player, right? Like he does so many great things for us. He does so many things right, and like he's great at receiving the ball in the box and finding a little bit of space and finding that position. But he's so limited in so many other ways as a center forward that if he doesn't get sort of great service, or if the midfield and the wingers are not like finding the space that they need to get him a scoring opportunity, there's just not much. Like he didn't create sort of his own shot. Like very rarely does he ever do that, right? And he's not going to take anyone on pace or on dribble. And so it's just one of those things where when we play good teams with good players, a good setup, a good manager, good defenders, a good midfield. Like we just don't have that extra step to like really distance ourselves. And when the best players on our team are consistently not able to be the best players on the pitch, we're gonna be in these sort of scrappy draws and missed opportunities all the time. This is just who this team is now, and I think we somehow still expect a certain level of dominance. It's just not. It doesn't match the team's makeup anymore because, like you guys mentioned, in the biggest moments in the biggest games, people like Barella, Bastoni, and Lautaro, they can't find a way to like really separate themselves from the other players on the other team. In fact, I think the player who has a big name, who's done the best and the most consistent for us in big matches generally, even though he's had some real duds, is like you mentioned, Demarco and Hakan. I think Hakan has in some ways come up with very clutch goals for us and played really well. And it's just we don't have the sort of playmakers that we need, I think, to comfortably win these sorts of matches. And so it's going to be a fight till the end. I think that was my main takeaway. I know I've said it a few times, but that's kind of where we are as a team. So like, you just kind of accept that and we go for it. I don't really blame Kivu. I agree with you guys that some of the substitutions were late. I do think one player that deserves a lot more playtime, in my opinion, is Bonnie. There's something that irritates me about Taram's body language and his style. It's just starting to get to me, and I would rather put a young, hungry player like Bonnie out there than keep to rely on Taram, even though I think Taram has a greater skill set.
It's a funny conversation because I want to try something different in these big matches. I don't want to keep our own version of insanity. And while Kivu has deviated from the Inzaghi standby starting 11, I think we all agree that's minus Luis Enrique being in for an injured Dumfries. Like today is our preferred starting 11. That's who we ran with. And my thought was, okay, like let's try something different. Let's give Bonnie a start over Taram. Let's give Pio a start over Lautaro, even though that will never happen, and just try something different in these spots to like send a message to try and get something different out of the team. But, like, can we really sit here and say, like, the attack's the problem when you concede 2 goals? Like, if you score 2 goals in a match, it should be enough to win it when you're Inter. I think a lot of our problems are once again rooted in the defense, rooted in the poor defensive play by the midfield. And Sterling touched on Akanji, and I touched on Akanji as well. I'll take it a step further. I'm willing to say that based on today's performance alone, I don't want Akanji to be the center back of the future. Let's move him back to where he played most of the season. Let's move him back to right center back in the future and sign a new central center back because today was underwhelming enough for me to think this can't work long term. I don't know who the new central center back is going to be, but we all know we need one, if not two, given everything going on with Cherby and DeVry. I'd like to see us address it in this winter window. Honestly, Morata needs to do something in this winter window because I think today showed you that while this team is good, this team is capable of winning a Scudetto. We need to do something to give this team that little bit of oomph, that little bit of an edge needed to finish out what is going to be a very chaotic season. So we talked. I don't know if we talked in great detail about Luis Enrique, but I thought this was a very poor performance. I know Irfan kind of ripped into him a little earlier. It the thing that bothers me about Enrique, and I know he was involved in the first goal. It was kind of him and Bastoni fighting over who was going to was it Almas who or no Spinazzola who had the ball before it got crossed into McTominay? Like they were kind of going back and forth on that. So that wasn't the issue for me. The issue for me with Enrique is like every attack down his flank dies. And for a player who's supposed to be like an attacking prowess player, it's just like we created nothing from the right flank today. We didn't create much at all. And I pin a lot of that on him. But Irfan, you're talking about the quality of players. You're talking about, the team overall. And I think we need to take a step back and say that, hey, man, like as much as we don't want to hear, it's like Juan Jesus. He's 34 years old. He's been in Serie A pretty much his entire career. And frankly, like if you made me choose between Juan Jesus and Basek, I'm taking Juan Jesus. And if you made me pick between McTominay and Barella, it's a conversation. I'm probably taking McTominay to be quite honest. Like that, and I'm not like there are good players on this Napoli side, and our players haven't played well enough to like warrant the laurels they receive. So
And mind you, this
we
was a
need to
Napoli
inject.
with no Anguissa, no De Bruyne, no Lukaku, no Gilmore, and no Neres. So there's a lot of talent that wasn't available for them today. Particularly Neres has been in imperious form over like the last month or so. The other ones, no Lukaku, no De Bruyne, they've been out for a while, but particularly no Neres and no Anguissa, like that. Those are some really big misses for them. And so you struggle to think it's like, okay, if they had at least those two players again who add more and more physical presence to the team. I mean, even with our best lineup today, I think we would have really struggled to maybe even get a draw out of this
Yeah,
match. There's just something about this Napoli team in particular that we really have a tough time with. And again, I think it does come down to the physical aspect of it. And really quickly to touch about Luis Enrique. I think I'm a bigger Luis Enrique fan than most. I think that there's potential there for a good, effective player in our system. I like his passing a lot. If I'm not mistaken, I think he's even involved in the buildup for what leads to the penalty in the Mkhitaryan situation. And maybe it's also the fact that I'm so used to seeing Dumfries in that role, who just can't really thread a pass at all. That he's like a glass of water in the desert in terms of just build up play and ability to combine with um, the forwards and also the right Matsala. So I feel like he's not the biggest problem by any means. Is he a solution? I don't know. There does need to be more. He needs to be braver. He needs to make runs in behind. Um, but I honestly didn't think that he was a disaster today. I think that he's kind of like the opposite of a liability in many ways. He just plays it very, very safe all the time. And I understand what you guys are saying as well. He's not he's not a solution, but he's also just not a problem. He's kind of like a 5 to 6 rated player in almost every match, and I still have hope for him that he can turn the corner. Maybe if he scores a big goal or has a big assist or something along those lines. But he's certainly not another player that is not a leader. And what this team really lacks is a real leader that will really stand up and a guy who says, "Hey, I'm that guy. I'm him, and I'm going to try and I'm going to take this match by the scruff of its neck." And right now, we just don't have that guy in the locker room. We don't have a Ibrahimovic type personality in the locker room. We don't have an Eto in the locker room. We don't have a Melito in the locker room. We don't have that type of player. And so we're looking around at all these different guys, and there's plenty of people that we can pass the blame around to. But you know, w- we need something that we at this point we have to just be honest. The team is lacking something. We've changed the manager. We've done some minor personnel changes to our starting lineup, but something in these big matches is still missing, and I just don't know who that person is in the locker room right now.
Yeah, but Sterling, I feel like what you said about Enrique, and I don't actually disagree. Like, I think he hasn't been all bad at all. But I think what you said about Enrique kind of sums up like where this team is, just where the ambition of this team is, where the ambition of this ownership is. Like, it's just that's where they are. They keep adding these players that are 5 or 6 sort of rated players, and they expect that that's going to somehow, maybe they'll hit a home run, and the player will massively overperform, or they take these aging veteran sort of players and hope that they can get like a year stopgap. But then what ends up happening is that they pull a summer and they put these guys out there for 3 years, though they're obviously declining because they don't want to spend money. So I think this is part of like a bigger issue with this club. And Andrew, you just mentioned that, you know, the one thing that this team has shown, the one thing Kivu has shown is that like we're right there. Like we are there. The team is good enough to battle for a Scudetto. Like all we need is a couple of like, pieces added at like strategic like, positions. But I'm sure you and Sterling, I'm sure no one has faith that the management or the ownership is actually going to spend the money to give you that center back, because I agree with you. I don't want to see a Kanji there anymore. Like I think he's good where he's at. And I think Bastoni is fine where he's at. I think you need to find somebody to plug into that center back role. They're not going to get it. You're not going to get it. You're going to get the equivalent of what we got, 2 or 3 years ago when they signed Caicedo, when we desperately needed a forward because of injury. And it was a different regime back then, but we ended up getting Caicedo and he did nothing. And we lost the Scudetto by like, 1 or 2 points, right? Like that's the model that this ownership is operating in right now, because frankly, I don't think they give a shit if we win a Scudetto. I think they're interested in us finishing in top four and making it to the quarters of the Champions League. And that's the fundamental problem. The fans still have an expectation that we're going to take advantage of the talent level and we're going to win a Scudetto and we're going to go deep in the Champions League, where the management and the ownership's expectation is not that. And we just have to come to grips with it, I think.
And to your point, Irfan, I think the biggest thing I can point to in this team that leads me to believe that there's just not a huge will to really heavily invest is the fact that we're entering really second, maybe even you could call it our third season without a true Hakan backup. We haven't had somebody who's really of the level to actually play as a backup regista since Brozovic left the building. And we're also in another season without a true backup for Barella, where we have Augusto essentially having to be both the backup left wing back and the backup left center back, because we went and gambled on Palacios as the backup left center back, and he's been an absolute flop. And obviously, Aslani was an absolute flop as a backup regista. So, what one thing I will say though on the opposite side of that coin is that this was the first summer we've spent money in a while, right? And management has at least shown some willingness to try and go after some bigger names. We did try and land Kone. We did try and land Lookman. I think that you can debate about what happened in the summer between those two names, but I don't necessarily feel like it was on management that those deals didn't get across the finish line. And then also the Cancelo deal from this transfer window, where again we tried to make something happen, a player who could have been a difference maker, even if he was here for a short stint, and he just didn't want to come here. He had another option and he decided to go another place. So that's the only thing I will say, and the only reason I'm gonna be still cautiously optimistic about this management and pump the brakes before I just completely damn oak tree, because we have shown that we are opening the purse strings a little bit. But yes, some of the signings have been punts, right? Because when you go out and you sign a guy for somewhere in that mid 20s range in terms of price spent, and then you're also trying to get younger players. Well, in reality, if you're buying a guy who's 24 or less, and you're paying less than 30 million for him, it's somebody who is a gamble. That's just the reality of modern football, where it's if the guy was in his early 20s and he was a sure thing, he'd be double the price, right? And so, we're basically we're taking these punts on guys like Diouf. We're taking these punts on guys like Luis Enrique. Um, and so, I see what you're saying, but at the same time, it's still a step up from where we were even the season before, where the biggest transfer that we made the prior year was the backup goalkeeper who still can't get in over summer, and he was in the teens what we spent, right? So, you know, w- I'm
Yeah.
I'm kind of like 50-50 on the whole thing. Like I see both sides of the coin, I really do, but I'm going to choose to be cautiously optimistic about management and ownership for the time being.
The current oak tree is better ownership than late stages Suning. The factor we're not pricing in here is that Suning had sale requirements every summer that we do not have. We've been able to, for better or for worse, retain this core of players. We haven't had to sell Dumfries. We haven't had to sell Taram, despite, well, I guarantee you, under previous, under Suning, one of these guys would be on the chopping block. But when I get really frustrated, it's not with Oak Tree, but it's with Morata. And I understand Morata has done a lot with very limited resources. And we've talked about if he had an English budget, he'd win 6 Champions Leagues. I'm joking, but you get the point. But I'm so critical of Morata because he has to be perfect. The scouting at this club has to be perfect in order for this to work, because that's the reality of the budget we're working on. And to waste money on Diouf when you don't have a Hakan backup, to spend so much money on a Dumfries backup who doesn't look good enough right now to ever replace Dumfries. Like, these are mistakes you can't afford to make with this budget. And it, th- just these small fundamental issues with the squad, whether it be trusting Aslani, whether it be getting the Tramy thing wrong, like, these are the reasons why, in my opinion, we haven't won as many trophies as we could have. If we signed better players for those spots, I think we'd have a few more trophies with us. I know it's easy to blame the star players. I know the star players have let us down, but we are asking a lot of them, and it's tough, like I said earlier in the podcast, when you have to start these guys every big match because there's nobody else. There's no guys on the bench we can realistically turn to. Like, if you want to light a fire under Hakan or Brella, who are you benching them for? It's not even a conversation. If you're disappointed with the way Bisek's playing in a match, who are you replacing him with? It's just, this is the reality of why we need to get every transfer right. And we haven't. And as a result, we have a good team, but not a great team.
Yeah, I'll just add on a more positive note. I mean, Miko's not here, and the
Yeah,
fans.
who played well today, Irfan? To
Yeah,
give me some positives.
the fans love Miko, and so Miko's not here, so I feel like we owe it to the fans to give a little bit of positive spin. Um, I think Hakan did a really good job with this penalty. It was pretty much unblockable. I think Demarco did a great job with his goal. I thought Zelensky played okay. He made a couple of
Yeah,
mistakes, and he
Morski
wasn't,
played well.
yeah, as effective as I think he should have been, but he was okay. And honestly, like, the team today, as much as we're harping on McTominay scoring the 2 goals and Lautaro going missing, like, we were still we had the lead with like 10 minutes left to go. Like, we were there. We scrapped enough. We did enough to like earn a win. It just didn't happen for us. But look, in the grand scheme of things, if you look at this in a vacuum, 1 point against Napoli is not a bad result at all, right? Like we take care of business against the teams we need to take care of, and if you get draws against your top four opponents, like that's nothing to cry about. So
Yeah.
it's not a bad result at the end of the day. And we just have to keep grinding and keep getting better. And the team is in a decent run of form right now. We have a bunch of easy matches coming up, and so we should be able to right the ship and go in strong. I mean, I think the next hard match we have is against Arsenal in the Champions League. And I expect that in typical Inter fashion, we're gonna play really well in that match. Like it might not be enough, we might make the same mistakes down the stretch, but the team does up its game. It's just this constant leakage of late goals is what just really gets to me. But overall, the team did enough to win 3 points. They were unlucky, in fact, to come away with just one. I mean, we hit the post. I think, well, Turam almost hit the post, or maybe he hit the post, and then Mkhitaryan hit the post too. So, like, we were
Well,
pretty close to
well,
getting more points.
Mkhitaryan hit a shot that was definitely going to miss the target. That took a deflection that hit the post. To be clear,
I'm trying to be Miko. Come on, let me be Miko.
here,
And
let me be optimistic. I still
okay,
think we're going to win the Scudetto. I do.
me too.
Like
Me too.
there was enough. Getting 1 point versus zero, as we've been doing these big games, is a big difference in the end of the table. And I will say, like, we are playing great when we play these smaller sides. Our only slip up was pretty much an exhibition form against Udinese. Like we're doing the job, and if we can keep that up, we will get this job done. But I want to see us get some help. I want to see us sign our right wing back or center back in this window. But I still believe we can get this done. As much as we're complaining today because we're frustrated because this team didn't win one of these games, and as I said at the top of the podcast, winning this, well, I would be dancing in the streets about our Scudetto chances. All that being said, we still have enough to get this done if we can maintain our form. And if you look back to last season, what happened was we reached this like January, February time slot where their fixture congestion kicks in, and the team's form fell off. That's really when we lost the Scudetto last year. It's when we had that lull in January and February when we started playing those Champions League knockout matches. Let's see what happens this year because if we can maintain our form, if we can beat Lecce, if we can beat these smaller sides, like the Scudetto's ours for the taking.
Yeah, and we do have the depth that we do have is good enough for these smaller Serie A matches. I have no fear starting Susic in the midfield against Lecce. Carlos Augusto, I mean, he could start just about any match. Pio, Boni. I mean, we do have more depth throughout the team this year. And that's another reason why we've been able to navigate a lot of these smaller games better than the other teams that we're competing with. I think where we're still having going to have that issue is in these matches like today. Do we trust some of those young guys to come in and really make a difference for us and let them play real legitimate minutes and not just 10, 15-minute cameos. I think we may have to. We'll have to see how long Hakan is out. Hopefully, it's not for long. And, again, it goes back to the fact that he's had to play. That was his third match that he had to start this week because we just don't have anybody who can, that can play in his place. But and we'll have to see, I guess, how we do with Susic now that he probably just got promoted to being a starter, at least for the foreseeable future, assuming Hakan is going to be out. So, um, you know, hopefully we can see some growth there because that would just be another piece that kind of adds to our overall foundation. So, um, overall, I do agree with you guys. We are we are the favorites, bar none. This is still in my mind our Scudetto to lose. So, hopefully we just don't do the Inter thing. I'll leave it at that.
I would love, and like if you wanted my confidence to go from like 60 to 80%, it would be us loaning out on a paid loan or selling for Tazy and us signing an actual Hakan replacement, us signing someone who can actually play his position because that is like the missing ingredient here. If I don't know what the injuries was for Hakan. I thought I saw it was his calf. He's been dealing with these soft kind of tissue muscle issues for what feels like 2 or 3 seasons now. And if he's going to miss 6 games, 3 weeks, something like that, we're going to be in trouble. Hopefully, he can make a speedy recovery because that's really like that is the biggest bottleneck in this team. That's why Aslani not working out cost us so much. That's why signing Diouf instead Regista was like so puzzling to me. So I hope Hakan can get back here soon. We need him. Zelensky or Barella will probably slide into that spot otherwise. And like you said, Sterling, you throw Sucic in the starting lineup, and as flawed as Sucic has been at times, like I still have enough confidence in him that he'll get the job done. All right, let's wrap this thing up with a quick Lecce discussion. I don't need to do a deep dive on Lecce. I'll just say that this is the last Serie A team we have not yet faced this season. This was the postponed fixture for the Supercoppa. So all the big boys, us, Milan, Napoli, we all have these midweek matches to make up for the Supercoppa. Home match against Lecce. Lecce has actually been better away than at home this year. Puzzling enough. I can't really explain that one. But if you look at the Lecce side, I guess the one thing I'm curious to see is Camarda, who is the, I believe, Milan-owned wonder kid. He's like 17 years old, 18 years old, playing in Serie A. He hasn't scored many goals this year, but he has played in almost every match for Lecce, usually off the bench. So I'm curious to check this kid out. He gets a lot of comparisons to Pio because of the, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for? The praise, the hype associated with them, even though they're a few years apart in age. But yeah, Irfan, give me a home match against Lecce prediction, and if you want to throw in any start sit decisions you're curious about, feel free.
I mean, this is just proper Inter right here, right? It's going to be 2-0, 2 goals from Lautaro. Lecce are 16th place. They don't score a lot of goals. I think they're among the least goal scoring teams in the league. So I expect us to keep a clean sheet, and this is where your amazing captain comes to play and scores 2 goals for you. So I'm giving it a 2-0 Inter win, both goals by Mr. Lautaro Martinez himself.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think they got a couple of red cards last match as well, for players that are starters for them regularly. So they're going to be down a couple of key players. And Kamara didn't feature in the last match. It was Stulic that featured against Parma, and he did score. But I'm not sure if Kamara is injured or what's going on with him right now. But yeah, I mean, this would be nothing short of a catastrophe if we drop points here. To be honest, we're at home. We're coming off the back of the Napoli match where we drew. So I think we need to get back to winning form as soon as possible. Would expect probably some rotation here. Certainly, I suspect Susic will come in to start the match. Um, Maybe we start Boney. I think that would be a good idea, or Pio. One of the two, I think, should start this match. Um, I wouldn't be surprised to see a Cherby come back into the side as well. He hasn't started a match since he came back from his brief injury. Um, and then I think you'll probably see Augusto maybe get the start as well, but maybe he'll come in at left wing back for DeMarco this time instead of left center back. So I think we'll see a partially rotated side, and um, we better get the 3 points.
Yeah, I'd like to see us rotate pretty heavily in this one. We do go to Udine next weekend. Obviously, we lost to them earlier in the season and just pretty tough away fixture. So this is the spot you try and rotate and get away with a little bit. I'm expecting a win. I'm actually going to predict a thrashing. I think we let out some of our rage from today's disappointment. So give me a 3-0 Bonnie brace. And Pio needs a goal. It's been a while since he's scored. He's had a couple nice assists, but the man needs to get on the score sheet. I'd actually like to see Bonnie and Pio start this match together and just able to
Does he
cut out
only
a
have
little
one
bit.
Serie A goal?
I think so.
He has that one away goal that kind of sealed the points for us late. I can't think of another goal he scored in Serie A. I know he scored in the other competitions, but
I think it was
I
against
think he's
Kyrie,
got
right?
like
I
one
think,
goal in every competition, basically.
yeah, I think I was there for the one league goal. I thought it was the second goal in the 2-0 against Kyrie.
Yeah, that's what it was.
All right. Well, I think we need to conclude with a Irfan's hot betting tip. Irfan, midweek fixture, you have Milan visiting Cesc Fabregas. They're taking a short 45-minute drive up to Como. Como has been a tough nut to crack this season, but Fabregas tends to fold a little bit in the big games when he's stubborn with his style of football. So he'll be playing Allegri, who is content to concede possession. So tell me, Irfan, how is Como Milan going to go?
5-0 win for Como. Um, I think it's going to be the way it's going to go. Or at least that's what I want to happen. So it probably will not happen that way, and it probably end up being like some bullshit 1-0 win for Milan. But no, I'm going to predict a 1-1 draw. The Milan draw streak continues. Como 1, Milan 1.
Perhaps Como scores an early goal and Milan scores a goal in the 93rd minute.
Exactly.
All right, we'll wrap up there. If you're interested in getting Miko back on this podcast, if you want him to be able to give you more content, I need you to smash that like button. I need you to leave us a review on Spotify. Do all the good stuff. And if you do that, Miko won't have to pay for his kids' college and he'll be able to podcast more often.
There you go. Forza Inter.
That's right. We'll catch you all then.